Our special guest today is T. Rogers. I consider T a good friend, and I've known T since I even started thinking about the Central Florida Freethought community. In fact, before I even started thinking about the Central Florida Freethought community, I met T, and she was doing amazing things before I even thought about it. And she's one of the hardest working people I know, helping with people in general, humanists overall. And I'm so happy that she's here today. She is a pre-planning advisor with Dignity Memorial, serving the Central Florida community. She's also a humanist celebrant, officiating at weddings and other life events. T is the author of the Identity-Affirming Deathcare Directives, which was just released in its second edition. She serves on the board of directors with the Pride Chamber of Orlando and is an advocate for the religious, secular, and spiritual identity inclusion for DEI education. Many of you may recall she was the on-campus advisor for the largest chapter of the Secular Student Alliance at the time, when there was a boom in that group a little less than 10 years ago. We miss her at UCF, and we miss the student groups as well. We've known T for a long time, doing the hard work in this humanist space. And if you didn't know already, she facilitates the STEM toy and book drive that we help each holiday season. So thank you for making that a very special event for us every year, T. And T is here to talk to us about a subject that we don't probably spend enough time talking about, but there is a good reason to. So please welcome T. Rogers.
Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I know you're very excited to talk about death today, right? You all woke up and said, oh my gosh, we're going to an event and we're going to talk about death. I know that this topic can be very difficult, and I know it's a touchy subject for some people, but today we are going to focus specifically on how diverse identities, atheist, humanist, and secular identities, experience death care. Okay, so I want to start with the basics. What is discrimination?
Treating someone differently.
But you're treated less well than other people.
Absolutely. Being treated differently, being treated unfairly, prejudicial treatment based on your identity and based on who you are. So my supervisor comes to me and says, hey, T, I'm not going to give you this promotion because you're an atheist. Here's that in writing so you can take that to HR. Is that how that happens? No. It is much more subtle and subversive, right? And it can be very hard to pinpoint and talk about what that discrimination is. It is very often a deeper emotional experience for people who are othered because of who they are. And it's a scale, right? So there's some people who are not impacted at all, and other people who lose everything. And knowing that there are people without a voice, who are losing everything, who are afraid of losing everything, that just fires up my inner warrior. How about you? So to me, it's important to be mindful about how we can help one another, because I believe that uplifting one another is our greatest responsibility. So, as Jocelyn said, I currently work in Deathcare, and I believe that every person of every identity deserves to be authentically honored in Deathcare and to have equal compassion. Have you ever thought about that? Some of you have. I've been thinking about that since December 2nd, 2019. And we'll come back to all of this, and we're going to come back to Deathcare in just a little bit. I just wanted to churn those thoughts. Today, we're going to take a look backwards, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the advocacy work that led up to this inclusion in Deathcare work that's going on now. We're going to talk about the Identity-Affirming Deathcare Directives book, And then we're going to talk about some things that are going to be going on next, right? So what's next with that project and what's going on. So for about 15 years, I served at the University of Central Florida as a projects, events, and chaos coordinator in a vice president's office. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to get involved in volunteer work, not only out in the community, but also at UCF. So we're going to talk about both of those things. I had always been a volunteer. I'd always been involved in the community. But right around 2011, I started thinking about volunteerism through the lens of secular identity, right? Which is a little bit different view of that. And compassion industries, right? They can be inherently faith biased. So that faith bias can be a barrier or deterrent, not only for people to volunteer, but also for people who might need to seek help, right? Who might need assistance and be hesitant to go and seek that help. Some of you may remember a little group called Be Orlando. Does anybody remember that? We were very small. We were in existence from about 2011 to 2018. We officially closed in 2019. We did about 66 projects a year. Now, B was about service. It was about bringing people together to make a difference in the community. But there was always an undercurrent of advocacy. So I always talked to the administrations at the charities where we served about how faith bias might be impacting the people that they're serving. Because those charities are counting on their relationships with clients and donors and volunteers and employees. And many of them had never thought before about how faith bias in their organizations might be impacting those relationships. So no one should have to pray to or defer to someone else's God or gods in order to feed their hungry children or in order to help build a house for people in need. So, like I said, Be Orlando closed in 2019, but one project that kept going was the STEM gift drive. So thank you all so much for being a part of that. Every year so far, and I'll put that so far in there just as a challenge, but CFFC has been the largest donor. So we've been doing the STEM gift drive since about 2015, and we're up to over about 1,500 gifts at this point that have been donated to the community. We are partnering with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Florida. BGC National has an extraordinary dedication to STEM for the at-risk youth that they serve. And here in Central Florida, BGC has 42 physical clubs serving more than 17,000 at-risk youth in our community. So in each of those clubs, they have a dedicated STEM education room, and they are uniquely positioned to distribute those gifts to children in need. And one of the great things about partnering with them, I won't stay on this too long because it's not what we're talking about today, but those staff members are connected to those students and working with them every day. So if you donate a telescope, that's going to get into the hands of a young person who's interested in astronomy. They're not just distributed out. Okay. So while I was at UCF, since about, first of all, is Liam here? Did Liam? You're Liam!
I don't know why I'm being mentioned.
Are you the Liam who's restarting the SSA at UCF?
No.
Okay.
I'm not a student.
Well, I was going to introduce Liam, but this is not Liam. So at UCF, I was the advisor for the Secular Student Alliance from about 2010. In 2013, Secular Student Alliance National launched an initiative called the Secular Safe Zone. And we were very proud to be one of the first institutions to implement that across the university. But as we developed partnerships and worked with diversity, equity, and inclusion, excuse me, I want to say that again, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You all know they've taken that out. And student development and enrollment services and LGBTQIA plus services, we were able to develop a little bit more of a broader program. So we had official diversity classes through the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And those were inner worldview inclusion that included just kind of discussions on respect for all religious, secular, and spiritual identities. And we also had classes on specifically atheism, right? What is it like to live without a belief in God in our culture? So humanist and secular services at UCF developed. We managed the Secular Safe Zone and all of those classes. We also were able to establish a Secular Student Award. So that is part of the official UCF Foundation. And I just looked it up the other day and it's still there. It's not being managed anymore, but it's there, so it could be picked up. And that was it was a $1,000 scholarship award that was going to be given every year to a secular student for their participation in volunteerism. In 2017, that award went to Anna Lonergan. That was the first time that we were able to give it out. And then there hasn't been an award since. Recovering from religion. Are you all familiar with recovering from religion? So it is, for anyone who may not be, it is a national organization, and one of the major things that they do is facilitate peer support groups to help people who are journeying away from religion or who have journeyed away from religion. The students had coordinated that for a couple of years at UCF, and then I took over and ran those groups from 2016 to 2018. And then we were starting to do some events. I was getting asked to serve on faith and interfaith panels around the university, which was nice. Those of you who know me and have talked to me before know I do not like the term interfaith, but if that's what we're going to call it, I do want a seat at the table because we need a voice. And we had started hosting some of our own events as well. We did an expert panel on minorities in the non-religious community. One thing I forgot to mention, does this work? It does work, doesn't it? The religion and non-religion website. So the university had a website for specifically for religious students to be able to find inner life support and community and events around their shared values. So we were able to transform that site into religion and non-religion so that students of all religious, secular, and spiritual identities could be represented there equally and be able to find resources. There were a few things that were left undone at UCF when I left. These were all in planning stages. So Humanist Faculty and Staff Association was a really important project that we were developing. As I did the research to develop the Secular Safe Zone at UCF, as well as the Humanist and Secular Services greater programming, I heard a lot of stories from both students and faculty and staff. From students, there were some challenges being faced at the university, but most of the challenges faced were from family, right? Being estranged from family or having difficulties out in the community or at employment. From faculty and staff, I heard a lot of stories about extremely religious colleagues or even supervisors that were making the working environment very uncomfortable. So it's very important to bring people together and have that support and community, just like Jocelyn was talking about earlier. The Secular Philanthropy Research Project was a group of 5 interdisciplinary students who were going to be doing a large research project on secular philanthropy. Inner Worldview Expo is just what it sounds like. The Humanist Assembly was going to be, you probably all have heard of Oasis or secular or Sunday Assembly, but it was going to be something like that because so many religious traditions on campus had congregational activities every week. And so we wanted something that was going to provide an alternative, right? Something where the secular people could go, also where a lot of religious people could go who didn't want to be part of those religious congregations. And that happens a lot too. I'm very sad that didn't work out because I was very much looking forward to writing atheist sermons. And the secular intern program was just, we were going to have 2 interns at B Orlando, which was a 501c3, and 2 interns helping to develop and further the humanist and secular services. The one thing that has carried through was we were able to add non-religion as an explicitly protected class at UCF. So in 2016, I presented to the policy committee, and you'll see at the top here, this is the president's statement on non-discrimination that was re-signed this year. And at the bottom is their official policy on non-discrimination that explicitly says non-religion. We were hoping my teleprompter just went crazy. That's okay, I don't need it. So we were hoping that the secular student alliance groups at other universities would pick this up and spark conversations so that other universities could do that as well. And maybe that will still happen. So I don't know what happened. Maybe I divided by 0, I'm not sure. But in 2019, the position that I held at UCF was discontinued, and so I had to find a new path, right? Well, none of that work that I just talked about was part of my job, right? That was all volunteer work. So I had to find a new path that, one of those moments in our lives where we figure out, do we bounce or do we splat, right? So I was at a career fair, and I met someone at a table for the deathcare industry. And wow, I'd never thought about working in the deathcare industry. Have any of you ever thought about working in the deathcare industry?
Do they get good prices?
Do they get... Well, I mean, I have experienced loss in my life, right? I've been connected to the deathcare industry. But I never knew about how many career paths there are in deathcare and how many different ways that we need to be there to support our community and to support the families that we serve. And in all of my DEI work, I had never thought about death through the lens of inclusion. I had never thought about inclusion through the lens of death. So I was curious. How do diverse identities experience the deathcare industry? So I did some research, and I found heartbreaking stories of people being turned away from funeral homes because of their identity. People being told they had to turn down the gay at their service if they were going to hold it at that funeral home. People sharing what it was like at a time of, grief and loss in that swirl of chaos that you're in, having to deal with a funeral director or other funeral professional that is pushing religious language at you when it's not something that you want. There was a Jewish woman that I worked with not too long ago. She shared that about 10 years ago, she had lost her father. And he was Jewish, she wasn't Jewish. Sorry, I ruined the whole thing. So she had to handle his arrangements when he passed away. And she did not find out until years later that he should not have been embalmed. that it was against his religion to be embalmed. I wasn't in the room with them, so I don't know what happened. It may be that that funeral director didn't even realize that he was Jewish. But these things are important to think about in advance. There are so many people who avoid health care and mental health care and discussions about death care just because of how they fear they might be treated. And compassion industries like Deathcare can be extremely faith biased. So I wanted to see, is there something that I can do to make a difference in this industry? And there's only one way to find out, right? Because no one should have to pray to or defer to someone else's God or gods in a time of grief or in order to serve people in their time of grief.
Amen.
Amen.
As they say.
All right, so let's refocus on us. And the first thing I want to start with on this slide is that word funeral. There are so many words to describe end-of-life ceremonies. What are some others that you know?
Wake.
Wake. Celebration of life.
Crossing over.
Crossing over.
Memorial.
Memorial. Right? Remembrance gathering, calling hours, comfort hours, repast, funeral reception, committal, graveside, scattering or tree planting service.
Sitting Shiva.
Sitting Shiva? Absolutely. Absolutely. The reality is, no matter what we call it, or no matter how we define the term that we call it, when someone we love passes away, we gather. We come together to honor that person and to support and honor one another in our grief. It's just something that's comforting, right? It's human. Now, we would assume that atheist funerals would be deeply personal because they're not going to follow the traditional religious script. So they would have to be something unique. But you can replace this word atheist here with modern. Modern funerals are deeply personal. I think so many people want to come away from that rote, ritualistic end-of-life ceremony and make something that is more unique and personal and honoring of the person that they lost. And of course, just like weddings, baby naming ceremonies, there are just infinite ways to compose and choreograph a ceremony that make them meaningful to everyone present and to anyone. So now I want to go back to our original discussion. We talked a little bit about discrimination, right? And what that might be like. But now we're going to focus on this space of death care where either for ourselves or someone that we love, we've gotten a terminal diagnosis, or we're talking to a death care professional after we've just lost someone that we love. What are some challenges you think atheists might face in that space?
A lot of services that hi everybody, I'm Chip, I'm new, first time. A lot of services that I've attended, originally from West Virginia, moved to New York for 20 years, now I'm here. But when I go back to Appalachia and you go to a funeral service, it's like a recruitment for Jesus. And we lose sight of the body in the casket, and it's all about your sinners, what path have you chosen. So that's a bit of my challenge, is how to experience that in a more humanist way and present that. My mom is upcoming, that's the next funeral I receive, and I want to give her what she wants and not the traditional, I'm going to the funeral home, you're going to sing these songs.
Absolutely. So one challenge is that funerals have traditionally been one way, and very often they can be evangelical, right? So how do we create a ceremony that is very personal to us? And again, just like weddings and baby namings, there is no required by law script, right? You can do any readings. You can do this in any way that you want. There are so many ways that you can personalize a ceremony. What else might be a challenge in this space?
Finding someone.
Family members? Oh, sorry.
Liam, you first.
Okay. Finding someone to officiate.
We're not going to be able to hear.
I can repeat.
Finding someone to officiate or people to speak who aren't going to bring religion into it.
Okay, absolutely. So finding people who are going to honor that secular space when they get up to speak. Randa, you were going to say something?
I was going to say family members who disagree.
Absolutely. So at a time of end of life, this tends to bring out both the best and the worst in families. So it can be even things that were a very small challenge or small disagreements in life can become much bigger. Steve?
Maybe find a judge instead of a minister.
So finding someone other than a minister, like he said, a judge, but there are professional celebrants that you can use.
Well, one of the first things you might run into, if you were not aware of any of this, is you reluctantly, as a relative of the deceased, you reluctantly go to a pastor and they refuse to do the service because you're an atheist.
Right, and then what do you do, right? If the only resource that you have is someone who refuses to do your ceremony, now what?
You find a ship captain.
You find a ship captain. Or you know what? There is no legally required person to do that ceremony. Anyone can do that ceremony, right? So some things that we have up here, in my conversations and my research, these are challenges that I find to be intersectional between the LGBTQIA plus community and diverse religious, secular, and spiritual identities. And remember, it's a long scale, right? Some people may experience no challenges at all and may not even understand why others do. Other people may lose everything or live every day with the fear of losing everything. I met a young man who, his family was extremistly religious, and he still considered himself a Christian, but he had been disowned because he denied some of their stricter teachings that he felt were more hateful than loving. And this was just an epic challenge for him. It pitted his love and his loyalty to his mother and his father and his siblings against his core ethical foundation. And then for atheists, that can be even more of a challenge, right? Because we are immersed in this Christio-normalized society, right? There are religious language all around us and religious signs and churches. All of these, you are not welcome signs here. Now, with these challenges, when death and grief visit our lives, it can be so complex, and it just adds weight to all of those challenges that we have to face. And I want to talk really quickly about one of these. So the fear of coming out, or the challenge of coming out. Do we all know what coming out means? So when you have an invisible identity that you have to share with people, you have to do that over and over, not knowing how you're going to be treated, how you're going to be judged, whether you're going to be overcharged, whether you're going to get fired. So it is important, and I'm going to talk about, there are a lot of different challenges we could talk about, but I picked 3 to focus on. So finding affirming providers. One specific challenge is finding someone in the deathcare industry that you can talk to that is open and welcoming to your identity or educated about your identity. A space where you can have this difficult conversation about deathcare where you can be your authentic self. So there was a couple who shared with me that they had decided to do some pre-planning, and they were very comfortable with the conversation about death. They called in and made an appointment with a pre-planning advisor. And this is an example of why friends don't let friends dial 1-800 numbers. The pre-planning advisor came to see them and kept using religious language and talking about religious elements to the service. using, just religious language, and shared that they were a past preacher, which is not uncommon in this profession. The couple said they just kept kicking each other under the table and later wished they had established a drinking game around it. They thought it was hilarious. But other people have shared with me when they've just lost someone and they're walking into a funeral home and there's crosses on the walls and Bibles and religious language being pushed at them, that when we have experienced religious trauma or where we're concerned about religious trauma, that can just make the whole situation of that loss that much heavier. So again, we need a space where we can talk about death care and be our authentic selves. The next is diverse perspectives, right? So when there is a service for someone who has been lost, all the people who love that person are going to come to the service. And that can include diverse religious, secular, and spiritual identities. So we might want to ask ourselves, do we want a service that is going to speak to everyone there? And how can we do that? And certainly there are ways, and I have suggestions that we could talk about, but there are other people that I've had tell me, I am an atheist, and I want an evangelical atheist funeral to rival any evangelical Christian funeral, right? And then navigating options. So there are so many options in death care, and I am not going to get into these today because we'd have to do a whole nother presentation on that. But if you are working with a death care professional and you are looking for a specific thing, is that person educated about all of the options that are available to you? Or are they reading from a script and only talking about what is available at their company? So I had someone tell me that they had gone to a funeral home and wanted to plan a green burial. Do you all know the difference between a green and a natural burial? No, okay. So a natural burial is where you're not going to have embalming, right? But it can still be at a traditional cemetery, okay? A green burial is where you are at a green burial certified cemetery, and there are no non-biodegradable caskets in that cemetery. There are no vaults in that cemetery. And this person, when they talked to the funeral home, they were told that they were both the same thing and that they could help them at their cemetery. So, and that person probably just maybe even didn't know the difference.
Do they do that in Florida? There's Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery.
Yeah, we have,
Oh, there's one in Tampa.
yeah, we have 2 natural burial cemeteries right now in Florida, and hopefully more will open. One thing is for sure, when we are facing our own death or the death of a loved one, we deserve affirming space to talk about that. So many people have told me that the death of a loved one was ruined, just completely ruined by well-meaning people who are just trying to do the right thing and help, but they don't understand that their religion that they're sharing is not helpful to everyone. There was a funeral I was at where there was a young lady who was sitting on a bench and she was softly crying, and one of the funeral attendants went over to bring her water and make sure she had tissues, which was very nice, and then wanted to share some words of comfort and started talking about how her loved one was in a better place and had wings and halos and was probably sitting on her shoulder. And that may have been comforting to that person, but that is not going to be comforting to everyone. So the issue needs 2 solutions, right? So we've talked a lot about what these challenges are. Now, how do we solve them? First, we need to empower individuals to think about this in advance. It is difficult to think about mortality and death for a lot of people. And many people don't plan ahead because they just don't want to think about that or have that conversation. But we need to go deeper and have that conversation in a way that we're thinking about how our diverse identities are informing our death care decisions. And then the second is we need to address this in clinical settings with health and death care providers. So sometimes I see the world like it's out in front of me as this beautiful rolling landscape, and I see this spot in the distance where if I could just draw in a little bridge, it might make the journey easier for someone. This little bridge is called the Identity Affirming Death Care Directives. So this is a free resource intended for all LGBTQIA+ identities and all religious, secular, and spiritual identities to not only reflect on death care decisions and identity, but also to provide some practical tools. So who has heard of a healthcare surrogate? Okay, someone want to tell me what a healthcare surrogate does?
If you're unable to act on your own behalf, they will make decisions for you.
Absolutely. So if you're incapacitated, they will make health decisions for you.
And if they're in your will, they have a better chance of pulling the plug.
So what about a durable power of attorney? Who's heard of that? Okay. What does the durable power of attorney have the power to do?
Whatever power you gave them.
Whatever power you gave them, but it's usually financial and legal decisions, right? So the healthcare surrogate does healthcare decisions, your POA does legal and financial decisions. When do those powers expire?
In a durable.
Upon your death.
Healthcare.
And both of them expire on your death. Absolutely. So you have thought in advance and you set up a healthcare surrogate and you set up a POA, but you pass away. Now who handles your final arrangements?
Personal representative.
Okay, if you've named someone in the proper way, absolutely. So it is going to be your next of kin unless you have done something like in the book, we call it a death care surrogate. But you want to make sure if this is something that's really important to you, if you are a transgender atheist and you do not want your Christian family handling your final arrangements, please talk to a lawyer and make sure that you have what you need in place. But this is one of the things that you really need to think about. Other things in the book that we cover are things like, if you are in hospice or in hospital, what do you want related to chaplain and clergy visits? And it's more than just the one-liner that they go through in the 5 wishes. This is really an in-depth exploration of what you want and how you want to be supported and how you want your loved ones to be supported. So now this tool exists, right? It's there. And it is there to help diverse people through the journey of exploring death care and thinking about how our identity informs death care and hopefully mitigating some of the challenges. I am very, very grateful to have been part of this. And there have been, so there was the first edition that came out in 2022. And since then, there have been a lot of conversations nationally. There have been a lot of people involved in this work. Rebecca couldn't be here today, but Rebecca DePontes did her doctoral thesis work on the IADD and clinical applications of the IADD for secular identities. Now we have to figure out what is our next step, right? Where are we going to go with this? So we need to get the word out to individuals who might benefit from having this in their hands, but we also need to get it into the hands of people who are serving people who might benefit from this. So when we're working in death care, we cannot take away or lessen someone's grief. and we cannot undo a loss. But there are things that we can do to take a rock out of the backpack that people are carrying and hopefully make that load just a little bit lighter. So this is a funeral director who found the IADD online and wrote to me saying that it really helped them in working with a grieving family. So these are some things that are going on nationally. Equal Death Care. That is a national initiative being spearheaded by a researcher named Jennifer Wright Berryman, and she is compiling resources like the IADD, but there are other resources out there, into a central site and helping people get access to them. Equal Death Care is focused primarily on LGBTQIA+ identities. There's very little focus out there on humanist, atheist, and secular identities. But Recovering from Religion, which we talked about earlier, they do more than peer support groups. They also have a lot of other initiatives to support people. And there's a group of volunteers there that are working on inclusion in death care and ways that we can educate their helpline providers, their volunteers, and people out in the community about thinking ahead for death care. Death care safe provider training. So that's something that I think is very important for clinicians to be educated about inclusion in death care. And there's an organization called Sage Care that has been working on putting together something for the LGBTQIA+ community, but there hasn't yet been anything for the secular community. So I have started developing a secular safe zone-esque curriculum that would be for health and death care providers. And then, of course, doing the outreach, spreading the word to both individuals and clinicians. So those are all the slides that I have. I want to thank you all so much for your time, and we have plenty of time for questions and to talk about what's on your mind, because that's what I really want to do. I want to know what your questions are and how I can best help you.
So I'll get a microphone and you'll be first. And I just wanted to say thanks so much, T. I appreciate you dipping into your past. We put a little bit of that in the introduction, and I know when we were trying to get you to come and talk, we were encouraging you to do that. So you've done a lot of great work here in Central Florida, and you're continuing to do it. And I really appreciate you being here today. So thank you so much.
I was just thinking, it might be good if you talk a little bit more about what's in the book, and that it's an individual thing for everybody to have, just for themselves to, gather their thoughts and put them down. Yeah.
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to invite?
I can. So first, I would encourage you to go to the how to use this book slide, right? So we have a guide to start you off so that you can look at that, see what sections are in the book. Remember that not all of these sections are going to be meaningful to everyone. So you want to look through this and figure out what is going to be, what is going to be meaningful for you, what is going to help you and your family, and use those in the best way that you can. Like I said, there are a lot of different sections. There are some that are informational. There are others that are reflections for you to write out things. So for example, there's an obituary and eulogy section. In my work in death care, people have told me that one of the hardest things to do is write an obituary or eulogy after someone has just passed. So there's a guide in here to talk about how you might incorporate your identity into your obituary or eulogy, and there's a space in there for you to kind of draft out some ideas for that. Okay? How you want your body presented, right? So just because someone is physically a female or physically a male doesn't mean we're going to make an assumption about what they're going to wear in the casket. Right? So making sure that people know how you want to be honored and what it is that you want is essential. We talked a lot here about remembrance services, but there are some ideas, I think, in here about how you might personalize those services so that they might be meaningful to everyone, or so that they can be evangelical atheist, however you would want that. Does that kind of help give a little bit of an overview on how to use it? Okay.
And you have a sample copy back there?
There are 2 sample books. You're welcome to look through them. And of course, if you grab a QR code off the table, or if you've already gone to it, you can pull it up right on your phone. It's absolutely free.
Just a point of clarification. You mentioned a couple of times safe zones in different contexts. What is a safe zone?
So that's a great question. So in the LGBTQIA plus community, there have been safe zones for a very long time. And what that means is someone has had intentional training about that or those identities. And that is a space where you can go to and share your identity without having to worry about how you're going to be treated or whether you're going to be judged. I have worked on the secular safe zone program, and that is kind of the very similar program for secular identities. Does that clarify?
So it's an individual one-on-one thing?
It can be an individual one-on-one thing, but we could also do it for a whole business. Right?
Yeah, as I recall, there was safe zone training at university so that you could identify the university as that, and also for LGBTQ at the university as well. But I know businesses and others are kind of a target for that type of outreach so that they can identify and be recognized by the public.
I just had a question. My father passed away in October, and he was an ardent atheist. And in order for hospice to come, or hospice came in, and of course that was their mission. And all they did was, as they were bathing him or whatever, they sang religious songs, they prayed over him, they did all this. Is there any way to educate that group or tell them ahead of time, because the family's not always there, to educate that group so that in order to use hospice, we're not subjecting someone who's ill to have all that happen to them.
So that's a great question. And again, the death care industry is a compassion industry and can be inherently faith biased, right? There are a lot of people that are there with religious perspectives and see what they do as a mission or as ministering to people. Part of the identity affirming death care directives, or IADD, if you think the world needs another acronym, is to make sure that the wishes are known so that you can share that with the company, right? And you can say, this is what, my father directed. Can you honor this? And there are other companies you can do business with if they can't honor that, right? Another part of this, though, is not, there's the one part where we need to get individuals tools in their own hands. We also need to do education on the clinical side and talking to health and death care providers like hospice agencies to make sure that they are educated about secular and humanist identities and that they know how to honor those. And I'll tell you, I've heard from, we think about the chaplains visiting in hospice when you're there in the hospital. And when I talk to chaplains, they tell me that we are inclusive, we are educated about all identities, and we are respectful to all people. But when I talk to people, I hear stories about religious chaplains and religious clergy coming in and just not honoring wishes, not responding when people say, I want you to go the hell away, right? They keep coming back. So there needs to be that education and, education on both sides.
Thanks, Randy. Good question. Adrian?
So my question actually dovetails from that. Do you work with or have anything to say about organizations like the Final Exit Network, organizations that promote and advocate that death with dignity? Like, for example, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dave Warnock. the man that has ALS, and he pushes for death with dignity, for people who want to choose when to end their life when they feel their quality of life is no longer acceptable.
Yeah, so my role as part of this inclusion in death care work is to seek out people like that, and I am very familiar with Death with Dignity, and make sure that as they are talking to people, they are educated about diverse identities and inclusion in death care, so that no matter who it is that's approaching them at this horrible, difficult time in their life, they can have a space where they can be their authentic selves and not have to worry about how they're going to be treated.
Thank you.
Okay, good. I heard about body farms on a news story where you can be planted and then forensic students dig you up to study decay. And you said something about cemeteries where you can be just planted among others. Are there compost services, and do they cost astronomical amounts?
Well, human composting is legal in Washington state. It's not going to be astronomically expensive, but the transportation part will be.
There's a few other states that are California.
There are a few other states where it's legal too, but so in order to do something like that, we would need to look at the logistics of getting you there.
Is there any movement to get it in other states?
Yes, absolutely. So different technologies and different options for human disposition, they are changing and evolving all the time. So there's constantly new things that are coming up. So, for example, right now, most people choose cremation because it is more, maybe they perceive it as more ecologically sound of a decision than traditional burial. But there's...
And cheaper.
And cheaper, although I think a lot of people choose cremation because of the variety of options that you have as well. But now there is a technology called aquamation or alkaline hydrosis, which allows you not to have to do the combustion cremation. So and I think we do have one now open in Florida.
How about, we're over here, Ken, I'll come to you in a second.
So putting on my engineer hat for a moment, thinking like an engineer, when you compile that list of people who do eulogies, will you tag them like they do humanistic Buddhism, or they do Stoicism, or other secular aspects? If you add those tags, people could find them more easily when they're looking them up.
Okay, absolutely. So right now, the best way to find a celebrant is, I mean, you can, of course, go to the Humanist Society, and there are celebrants there. But there are also specifically educated funeral celebrants through something called the Insight Institute. And then there's another training program that has a very robust funeral training. So when you're looking for a celebrant, you want to make sure that whatever tradition it is that you're looking for, you have someone that is educated about that tradition and can write a service that honors that.
What was the name of the institute?
Insight.
Hello. I just wanted to give a little plug for your group. My wife and I have been planning the ceremony for quite a while. And me being a very controlling individual, I've put together a PowerPoint of my life just so that I can share moments that were really important to me with the family members who are going to be there. And we went to the Dignity Memorial folks. They're very gracious. We told them we're atheists, and it didn't shock them whatsoever. And so they've agreed, and David knows who my celebrant is, because he's the one. So I just wanted to let you know that there are they call themselves still funeral homes in general, but there are places you can go to have atheist ceremonies in Orlando.
Keep working on that PowerPoint, don't stop. All right, keep adding to it.
More fun,
Yeah.
more fun.
And just a note on that, any company that you work with for pre-planning or at need, there are a lot of people who work in that company. Some people are going to be affirming, other people may not be affirming. So I'm very grateful to hear that you found someone that was affirming for you.
We were talking about deathcare surrogates as someone to make sure that your wishes are carried out after your death. I want to donate my body to religion, so how do I make sure that my wishes actually are carried out? Because, say, I don't want my body to go to a Catholic hospital or something like that.
So I think what I'm understanding from you is that you're looking for options for anatomical donation, and you want to make sure that your body doesn't go to a religious organization. So in order to sign up for anatomical donation, you have to do that online, and I can help you with that separately if you'd like. Just kind of look at where those options are. And there are different ways that you can do anatomical donation. So there are free ways that you can do it, and there are paid ways that you can do it.
Thank you, everyone, for all your contributions.
Oh, freedom from religion.